We're talking my must-own running backs for 2020, coming right up. And welcome to another episode of the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast. Today is Monday, August 10th, 2020. And of course, I'm Chip. I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to share this podcast with any of your friends or your family, please let them know that you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. You can also watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. So what's up, everybody? I hope everyone had a good weekend. This weekend flown by pretty quickly for me. It's one of those things where I'm trying to prep a bunch of videos, do a lot of prep for my upcoming podcast and YouTube videos. And, it's one of those things where, this is part of it. When you're trying to do fantasy football, you got to put the work in, you got to put the videos up, you got to put videos and podcasts up that people are going to want to watch and see to get them prepped for their drafts, but it didn't come with me binge watching on some things. Like, I'm the type of person who likes to work with noise in the background. So I don't know how many times I've watched Ghostbusters or The Office or, The Dark Knight. These are movies that are just on in the background for me that come on TV that for some reason, whenever they're on, they have to be on and I have to watch them to some, capacity. So, but, it's one of those things where it's fun for me. I know I like having that grind to be putting in for you guys and to make sure that my listeners are getting all the details of every fantasy, player and strategies and all that. So I hope everyone's able to actually listen to the last podcast that I dropped on Friday. I did a zero strategy mock draft, and it was a very interesting mock draft. I wasn't anticipating Alvin Kamara going at the 101, but that's what happened. I don't foresee that happening in any drafts unless you're really in a league with people that don't know the players, know names, but don't really know all the names. And then if you're with like a really big Saints fan, I can't see Alvin Kamara going at the 101. He is creeping up the draft boards a little bit. I think I saw him on Fantasy Probes. He was at the third position right now in PPR ranking. So it seems like he is getting up there in rankings. And another player that went fifth overall was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which it's not too crazy to kind of see him go that high, but there are going to be people that are going to overpay for him, and I think that's something that we're going to continue to see. So if you want to check out the complete draft board, I had posted the draft board over on my Instagram on Gridiron Fantasy Football, so if you want to check that out, then go over there on the social media and check it out. Let's go into the news. Right now there hasn't been really a lot of things going on. The two biggest things right now is that Jarvis Landry was activated off the PUP list. Obviously this is a good sign. This means he'll be ready for week 1, which everyone knows that I've chosen Baker Mayfield as my bounce back player. And I think this helps Baker Mayfield's redemption tour this year for, fantasy owners from last year who got burned on him. I think this is the year that he finally turns it around and breaks out and has that bounce back season. But I think that this is good news. Now he's going to have all his weapons unless something happens in training camp. Baker Mayfield is going to have all of his weapons going into the season, which is going to be great for him. And the other news, I talked about in the last podcast that Darius Geis got released from the Washington football team. So everyone's talking about Antonio Gibson. And today, Washington's running back coach Randy Jordan came out and said that Antonio Gibson still needs to be able to learn the protections and diagnose blitzes and all that. This isn't shocking. He's a rookie who hasn't had a normal offseason. He hasn't had OTAs. It didn't have mini camps. So to hear a coach come out and say that he still needs to learn these things, that's obvious. This is something that all rookie running backs are going to have issues with. And that's why Clyde Edwards-Helaire for me is a guy that I want to have on my team, but I don't want to overpay for him. But in order to have him, I'm going to have to overpay for him. But I just don't think these are the guys that I want to draft hoping for something to happen in the beginning of the year, because I just don't see it happening. Antonio Gibson has a bunch of people in front of him. If I'm choosing any running back off the Washington football team, I'm choosing Antonio Gibson because of the upside. I do think like someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Antonio Gibson are going to have a huge second, part of the season. So that's what you're drafting. You want to try and draft, these guys, especially Gibson. You can get still in the mid round, but his stocks continue to go up. But when it comes to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're going to have to overpay for him. So I'd rather take Gibson and then grab somebody that I really like that's been doing it for years and years as my RB1, but I just don't want to choose someone who hasn't had a full offseason to learn pass protections and all that stuff. So we'll see. But right now, that's the news. Not really a big news weekend. So right now we're talking to this week on this podcast. We're talking about my must-own running backs for 2020, and I chose 3 guys that are ranked, from 6 down to 14, and I think these are 3 guys that I really like that I'm going to be targeting in my drafts. And starting off with the number 1 running back. Now you have to understand these running backs are players that I think are going to give you good upside and value. And like I said, most people are going to choose the Alvin Kamara's, the Saquon Barkley's, the Christian McCaffrey's. I mean, we all know like those are must-own running backs. Like there's no dispute on that. So I try to pick running backs that are kind of on that fringe that you can still get, but also possibly give you that top 5 upside. And the first guy that I have on my list is Joe Mixon. I have him ranked right now at the number 6 position. I have him above Derrick Henry and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I've seen him do it year in, year out. He is a guy that hasn't been really given the opportunity to be that full workhorse running back, but he's had fantasy success. I mean, last year he was the RB13. The rushing offense for the Bengals, very lower tier. They were 25th last year, but it doesn't mean that I still don't love Joe Mixon in the PPR formats. I've always loved his talent. He's a complete running back. I just don't understand why they don't use him more out of the backfield. He's a great wide receiver out of the backfield. He's a natural pass catcher, and the only problem is he only had 35 receptions on 45 targets last year, which doesn't make sense because he's better than that. And despite the ups and downs that he had last year, he did manage to be able to have 6 games last year where he finished as the RB1. Now, when I say RB1, that means that he finished the week between 1 and 12. So anything that's between 1 and 12, I call and define as an RB1. He was able to manage over 1,000 yards on the ground with 8 total touchdowns. Now, Mixon last year was. He was dropped in a lot of leagues. He was having an awful season, and a lot of people were benching him or dropping him. I was fortunate enough to grab him on our free agency because we have a free-for-all free agency. So once a player gets dropped in my main league, there's 24 hours where the player's locked, and then it's free for anybody to get. So there's no fab budget or anything like that. And I was working with the patient, and I hopefully nobody at my work hears this, but I was working with the patient, and she was she was resting between exercises, and I knew that the time for him to pick him up was coming up. So I went on the website, and I was able to get him, and he helped me get to a fantasy championship because he had a great season after his bye week. And I think that, unfortunately, he didn't perform I made it to the championship game. And unfortunately, he had a stomach bug and he didn't perform in the championship game. But he did help me get to the championship game. But you can't fault a guy who had an illness. But I do think this year I feel like there's more for him to do. I mean, I think with Joe Burrow coming in as a rookie quarterback, I do think that he's going to be that safety outlet for Joe Burrow. I think that his targets are going to go up in workload because the fact of the matter is he is a guy that you can rely on. And Joe Mixon, to me, is a guy that he's obviously a workhorse running back. He's a 3-down back. There's no need for him to come off the field. So I really think that with that being the case, they need to get him the ball more. I mean, he only had 5 targets once last year, which when a guy that's that capable of catching the ball shouldn't only have 1 game with 5 targets. So with that being said, I just hope that Zach Taylor, the new head coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, will give him the ball because he is too good not to get the ball. I'm going after Joe Mixon this year as much as I can. It's a little easier in the auction league that I'm in, but he's a guy that I feel like is going to have a great season. So he's a must-own for me. And moving on to my second must-own running back, I have Miles Sanders. This is another guy. I own Miles Sanders in 2 of my dynasty leagues, and I love the fact that I have him. Last year he ended the season as an RB15, and him being an RB15 with him not getting full workload is actually not bad. I mean, right now he is ranked 10 overall, And, the Eagles have a good rushing offense. I mean, they were 11th last year in rush offense. I mean, Miles Sanders really didn't emerge last year until December. He tallied up 80 rushing yards, or 80 rushing attempts for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he had a great December. He also added 23 receptions for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's obviously a dual threat running back. He began the season slow. I mean, Jordan Howard was there, but once Jordan Howard went down, I mean, we saw what Miles Sanders can do. And even though he was still sharing time with Jordan Howard, he did have 5 games last year that he did finish as an RB1. So he's capable of even if he had to share a workload, he is that talented to be able to have games where, he can be an RB1. But, obviously, Miles Sanders last year was utilized more when the team was winning. So that's where a lot of the production came from. But with that being the case, this is a different season. He is by far the number 1 running back going to the season this year, and I think that we see that. I think that last year his targets were his average depth of target was 8.2 yards per target. So we know that they're going to throw the ball to him down the field, dump the ball off to him in screens. Like, he is a guy that can do that. So for me, I mean, we saw him get 5 to 6 targets consistently from week 12 and on. So if he's able to get the targets, he's gained his touches his rushing attempts, he's going to do well. And I think that it's just a matter of the workload. It was a little concerning that they were talking about adding another running back to the Eagles' backfield. They didn't do that. Devontae Freeman's still a free agent. They didn't go after LaShawn McCoy because LaShawn McCoy had said that he was choosing the Eagles and the Bucs and different teams, but they didn't add him. So for me, it's clear that Miles Sanders is the number 1 running back going into the season. Now, you do have Bart Scott, so that could be somebody who takes some time away from Miles Sanders, but I don't know. I just feel like it just makes me feel that Miles Sanders is going to get the workload that he needs to be an RB1. He is being drafted right now around that 10th position, so that's probably where he may end the season, but there's a lot of upside for Miles Sanders. The offense is good. I just see a lot coming from him this year, so Miles Sanders is my second must-own running back for the 2020 season. And last, I have, as my third must-own running back for this year, I have Josh Jacobs. I owned Josh Jacobs last year again, and, in one of my other, I've owned, and it's funny, like most of these players I'm talking about, I owned last year, just in one of my leagues. I play in 5 leagues, so these are guys that I've owned in some of my leagues. But Josh Jacobs, I owned in one of my main leagues, and he was kind of frustrating player to own. He was a guy that had high hopes. He didn't have a bad season. I mean, he did end the season as the RB14, so it wasn't like it was an awful season. But right now he is ranked at his ECR as 14. So he's kind of that fringe RB1, RB2 player. But the Oakland Raiders have a decent rushing offense. I mean, they were 13th last year. But honestly, Josh Jacobs, I mean, this guy right here is by far one of the most talented players we have in the league at the running back position. It's frustrating that he's not being utilized to his full capability. I mean, even Joe Mixon, it's frustrating that he's not getting used in his full capability as a pass catcher. But Josh Jacobs, he can catch the football, and I just don't understand what's going on and why he was not being utilized that way last year. Now, this guy he's 5'10", 220 pounds, and extremely talented. Like, this guy is a guy who can just blow up anybody. And, it's just weird to see John Gruden not really feed into that. So, John Gruden continues to say that he'll be used more in the passing game, but we never saw it last year. It was something that we were hoping for. We're trying to see, okay, maybe this will be the week that he gets the receptions, but it never happened. I mean, last year he only had 20 receptions on 27 targets, and those receptions resulted in 10% of his actually fantasy production. So I don't know. Jacobs still had a good rookie season. Don't get me wrong, but he did end up as an RB1 5 times last year, but 3 of those games, like most of his fantasy production came in 3 games. So those are the games where he had 23 or more PPR points. And this is the games that he had. He averaged 109 yards per game, and he had multiple touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns. So he can be that solid RB1 this year if they get him more involved in the passing game. So hopefully that happens. I mean, last year he had 9 games of 2 or fewer receptions, and that's not something you do for a guy who's that talented and catching the football. So I know they re-signed Jalen Richard. I know they added Henry Ruggs in the draft, but that will maybe take away from some of his targets. But Jacobs is a workhorse running back. He is somebody who doesn't need to come off the field at all. They don't need to put Jalen Richard in. They could just use Jacobs. I mean, he's that talented. So I just get frustrated to see a guy who's capable of doing these things and the coach is not doing it, So, but I'm not an NFL coach. I don't know, obviously everything that goes on with that. So he did only play 13 games last year because he injured his shoulder. So maybe it's load management for him. I have no idea, but he's definitely a guy who really should come off the field. But even if he doubles, honestly, if he doubles his targets and his receptions, he's clearly an RB1. I just hope that happens. I mean, we hear it, time in and time out that Jacobs is going to get the receptions, and it still hasn't happened. So hopefully this year it does. Hopefully John Gruden stays honest and gives Jacobs a bigger role in the passing game. But who knows? We'll see what happens. But it's one of those things where we just have to kind of play out and see. But, that's right now, those are my 3 guys. I mean, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, and Josh Jacobs are guys that I am targeting if I don't already have them in dynasty leagues and whatnot. So that's it. I mean, those are the guys that I'm choosing for my most owned running backs. And you have any questions or there's someone that you think should be on the must own list, please leave a comment, down below, because we want to see us in, I want to engage with you guys. I want to see these comments so I can answer back and forth and tell me what you agree or disagree about my choices. I mean, this is something that I'm open to it. So please allow for that dialogue to happen. So thank you so much for listening today. Like I said, please like, comment, and share the podcast, the YouTube video. The next episode, I'm actually going to do another mock draft. So this mock draft is going to be a little different. This mock draft will be formatted kind of how I, in my main league, it's going to be a 10-team, 2 quarterback PPR format. So that makes the draft strategy a lot different. So if you're in leagues like that, please check out that next video. That should be up by Thursday or Friday of this week. So please don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And also you can find us over on Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. That's it for today. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.